session.
To do that first?
It's now, you can pause it again.
Okay. I didn't know if we needed to record that part.
And everybody have to go.
Yeah, well, you,
Disagree with everything.
Well, I just didn't know.
Well, that's not a shocker. It would have been a shocker if you said it's free.
No, I don't.
I say I agree with
That pause
you.
button.
All of them.
This one, yeah, right?
I will call our meeting to order. This is Tuesday, November 7th. And can I get a roll call?
Okay, Director Bordonish,
Here.
Director Giardini,
Here.
Director Logan,
Here.
Pearson, here, Peterson.
Here. There's nothing to report out of closed session, and we will be returning to closed session after the our normal meeting is adjourned. Join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, special report time. I don't know if Highway Patrol is here. Oh, that'd be you, okay.
We wouldn't have recognized you.
I need it tonight. I like to keep everyone.
You look like a real person.
I like to keep everyone guessing. Well, you know. complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Good to be with you
Welcome.
out here. After this, but pleasure, and I know I've been a little bit scarce with all that we have going. I did learn maybe I won't have to go to APEC though. So maybe I'll be in town next week, which would be great. For the period of September through the end of October, so September 1st, October 31st. This is the activity in and around the Templeton area, both surface streets and freeways. I'll provide some comparison against our jurisdiction as a whole. Total crashes investigated 22 on the freeway, 12 on county roads for a total of 34. That's up 5 from the prior year, same period. Of those, the property damage collisions, 17 were on the freeway, 10 on county roads, for a total of 27, up 4 from the prior year. And in injury collisions, 5 on the freeway, 2 on county roads, a total of 7, up 1. DUI was involved in 6 of these collisions, that's up 1 from the prior year. We're happy to report there were no fatal injuries for the period. There was 1 for the period in our jurisdiction near Templeton here. That's compared to 4 the prior year for the same period throughout our jurisdiction. Our fatal collision counts are down. We hope that it stays that way as we enter the holiday season. We remind everyone to not drive distracted or impaired. Remind your friends, be extra careful throughout the holidays, and hopefully we can end strong with respect to our fatal collisions. There were 2,505 total enforcement actions taken throughout our jurisdiction for the period. That's up from 2,393 the prior year. 490 of those around the Templeton area, an increase of 50 over the prior year. The bulk of those on the freeway, of course. 260 citations were issued, 245 of those on the freeway, 15 on county roads. That's an increase of up from 10% over the prior year. There was 211 citations issued on the freeway for maximum speed, 9 on county roads, that speed above the posted speed limit, for a total of 220, up 20% from the prior year. And on the freeway, we cited 4 drivers for driving at speed in excess of 100 miles an hour during the period. That's up 1 from the prior year. So we continue to battle the excessive speeds. There were 7 citations issued for seatbelt violations, on par with the prior year, and there were 19 arrests for DUI. 7 of those on the freeway, 12 of those on county road. For a total again of 19, up from 14 the prior year. There were 72 DUI arrests throughout our jurisdiction for the period, up from 49 the prior year. The officers are working very, very hard. Staffing is moving in a good direction. We're not where we'd like to be, or certainly what our full complement would be. We're about 6 short of that. But just for your information, we are analyzing ways that we maybe can restructure our work shift and try to maximize the number of officers out even more as we nudge towards what we hope will be full staffing within the next few years. CHP recoups its staffing. And that's our report. If there are any questions.
I have a question. So the DUI numbers are going up, have gone up considerably. I mean, are we doing anything in terms of talking to the wineries or these tour vans, that taking people to multiple wineries and same day and then just letting people do whatever they want afterwards? I mean,
And that is, there's an element that may play a role in the overall crash picture, people in that kind of wine touring group. We're not seeing it in the arrests. The bulk of the arrests happen late at night.
oh, I see.
Bar closing hours. A fair segment of the arrests come out of collisions.
Okay.
And sometimes those are ones that are out in the county after leaving a winery or what have you. So in answer to your question, our public affairs officer works pretty closely with the wineries and tries to provide them with some education. We looked at trying to put on an event just last month. We had to put that down with other conflicts, but we may bring that back closer to the holidays or in the spring.
Yeah, that would be
As
good.
activity picks up. And sometimes they come to us, they feel that is an issue. And so they'll ask for literature, they'll ask for guidance, and even ask us to present to community groups where they may have access to those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You can go to your meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your service and tell all your patrol people that. too.
Pleasure. Well, so, great.
Senator Manueli,
Good evening.
you're up.
Good evening, Michael Manueli, Commander, your Sheriff's North Station. I have your report for October 2023. Calls for service, the station had 1,371 calls for service compared to last year, 2,257, a drop of 39%. That's pretty significant drop. For comparison, Templeton had 306 calls for service. Last year, we had 384, another significant drop of about 20%. Comparison to San Miguel, they had 171. That was less than they had last year, a drop of about 25%. So all across the board, those numbers had dropped. From those calls for service, the station generated 222 reports this past month compared to 258 last year, drop of about 14%. Templeton accounted for 61 of those reports compared to last year, 63. Minor drop of about 3. San Miguel had 38 reports for that time period. Breaking those calls for service down into particular areas of interest, assault and battery, I saw 6 calls for service generating 5 reports. We had a subject punched in the face by a subject who we knew the possible name of that person. We had a subject grab the victim by the neck and threaten to kill him. And then we had 3 domestic violence calls for service. Disturbances, there were 12 calls for service generating 2 reports. A tenant dispute resulted in 2 different case numbers in that case. 1 burglary call for service generating 1 report. Deputies were dispatched to report of a subject heard in the house. The reporting party said they heard somebody downstairs, then they heard somebody upstairs. We got on scene and were unable to locate any indication that there had been anybody in the house. There were 2 theft calls for service generating 2 reports. We had a wallet that was stolen out of the victim's work locker, and then we had a stolen cell phone. Vandalism, 1 call for service, 1 report. A subject threw a rock through someone's bedroom window. Trespassing, 9 calls for service generating 1 report. In that report case, there was a call of 2 men in the house. Again, deputies did not find anyone at that location and they responded. Phone scams, there were no phone scams reported or reports taken. I will remind you and the public in general that the sheriff's office will not call and ask for you to make payments over the phone. Again, we recently had a spoofing incident where the caller takes one of our numbers, it looks like an official number, makes a call from there, it says the sheriff's office, and they ask for money. Do not pay me or anyone else over the phone, just in public and in private, no. Disregard that. Suspicious circumstances, 13 calls for service generating 3 reports. We had a subject was reported in a house and was gone on arrival, but there were other tenants that lived in the house and it could have been a guest or anybody else related to the house. We were unable to determine. Known subject had used the caller's identification to get access to an account at the jail. Then a plastic bag with dirt and an anti-Semitic message was found on somebody's lawn. And this is possibly related to the other messages that have been seen throughout the county. You remember we had the protesters on our bridge and then we started getting these messages in our area, then they showed up in South County. We believe it's all the same group trying to generate some type of hate and everything else. We have yet to have any enforceable incidents that we can take action on yet. And then we just talked about it a little bit, but it's time to start preparing for another wet winter. We expect it to be heavy rains, hopefully not like last year, but we are preparing as if it was last year. And the County Office of Emergency Services, the Sheriff's Office, and all of your local first responders want you to be prepared for that. Start preparing now to know your zones. The Office of Emergency Services will be sending out warnings based on zones. The best way to learn your zone is to go to slowready.org. And if you go to the prepare link, it will tell you how to find your zones. Ready, slow, that is correct. Thank you for the correction, for catching that. ReadySlow.org. If I could only read what I have written here. And that is my report for this meeting. Thank you.
Any questions?
So I have a question. What happened to the panel of mailboxes on Old County Road?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Because
Did they get
those,
vandalized or?
oh, they're
They got smashed.
smashed. They were like dominoes.
There's a.
Oh, that sounds like,
CHP
that sounds like
sticker on there.
a CHP accident.
There was a sticker.
We talking on the south end?
No,
Right here,
Oh,
Old
I'm sorry.
County.
Old County and Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Not aware, we may have taken a crash on, I just haven't heard about it in specific.
Was this just within the last week?
Oh, it's been last week, and so
Yeah.
now the post office has no idea when those mailboxes will be replaced. Now they've been all removed.
It's
But
so-
there were 3 panels of mailboxes and they were like, or 4, they were like dominoes. And it was in the afternoon because earlier in the day they were fine and later in the afternoon, I drove by and went, what's happened with the mailboxes? So it looked like somebody had to have plowed into them. There's no way you could have just pushed them over because they're bolted down in the ground.
Yeah.
And so the post office has no idea when they're gonna be back in place, so Wayne and I have to go pick up our mail every day.
No,
But I was wondering, I was curious is what happened, cause it had to have been in the late afternoon. I don't know, maybe a panicked parent going to pick up their child.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in my reports, and I would have normally picked that up, when I was preparing for this report, so I didn't see anything in that. Now, it could have happened after the 31st, or it may have been handled by another agency.
It was around the 30th, 31st, so it's possible, yeah. But I'm just curious what happened, I mean, cause,
I'll look into it, and if I determine anything, I'll let you know.
yeah,
We're just curious what happened.
yeah, I'm just
Sometimes-
curious.
Sometimes it doesn't get reported, especially
Yeah.
in the wee hours, and no one ever tells us.
Well, there was a sticker on there, so it
Yeah.
looked like it had been,
CHP sticker on.
Yellow.
was it
Yellow.
CHP?
Oh.
Yeah, it was a yellow sticker on it.
You figured it out.
And then we've gone- Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll try to track down that report, and it might have happened.
I mean, there's no tire marks, so whoever, I mean, they just had to plow into them and just knock them all over.
So we had one on the north end of the street, that's why I asked, I remember that report was for mailboxes.
Somebody did like
To be honest, I think the guy that called us was the guy that hit him. Yeah. I think he backed into him and then wanted to just get it cleared real quick.
You know, the lieutenant will back me up on this. Our roads are dangerous. We're not like a city metropolitan area where we have curbs and well-lit streets and, you know, nice paved roads with good defined lines and everything. And, our young drivers and other drivers, there's a lot of accidents and fatalities out there on those roads that shouldn't happen, wouldn't happen in other metropolitan areas where you have freeways and 4 lanes of traffic going one way. Because you can't tell when you're on the road sometimes here if you're not paying attention or if you're distracted or even intoxicated.
Well, thank you anyway.
Thank
Thank you for your service as well.
We'll see you soon.
Alright.
Tom, do you know what our zone number is?
So we are TEM, well, we have 4 zones, and I'll tell you what, I'll just send those out to
Okay.
the general manager and have them disseminated to you, cause they're in a different zone. You guys are in a different zone. I'm not sure where.
We could put together a little map or something that actually send out utilities.
And actually, I can do I had planned on doing a presentation on ReadySlow.org, which is now called, it's Zone Haven, but it's now called Genesis. And it's the evacuation mapping and notification system that the county OES is using.
So given that some of these roads along Old County, I mean, they were impassable, this last winter. It might be good to send the zones to the residents and then also refer them to this link,
That,
but let people know what zone they're in,
yeah,
and make a broader communication.
yeah, county OES has sent out a flyer and then they've done a press release and there's
Haven't
been
gotten
a.
the flyer.
I keep hearing on the news all the time, they say,
Have
know
you
your,
gotten a flyer?
know your evacuation zone.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
zone.
And I,
exactly.
you know,
So I'll tell you what, let me put something together with the general manager.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm just worried because you could not pass, along
Oh.
Old County. None of those roads were passable. And we're kind of cut off
Yep.
from the, west side.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it even came up over the Florence Bridge. So.
okay.
We're on the lookout.
if I get evacuated, I'm not gonna go.
If the flood reaches your house.
Nah.
we're
Yeah.
on-
I'm building an ark.
Yeah. You'll be floating on by.
Okay, order of business, would any board member like to change the order of business?
There's only one item.
Well, true. Okay, there's no public, so we'll dispense with the public, comment. Consent agenda. We have 3 items, the minutes for October 17th. Resolution for CAL FIRE grant agreement, authorization and budget amendment, and C, utility vehicle purchase agreement.
I'd like to pull item B, please.
B,
Yes. The Cal grant.
any other questions, comments? Okay. So can I get an approval for the minutes A and C?
I'll make a motion to approve those 2.
I'll second it. Roll call.
Okay, Bogdanovich,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Giardini. Aye. Logan.
Aye.
Peterson. Aye.
Okay, item B. The B.
Yes, thank you. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to thank Chief again for applying for this grant and getting this. It definitely helps. So I really appreciate it. You've been really good about that. I do have a couple of questions. Can you please explain why we need to replace these 2 items, the equipment, the structural turnouts, as well as the structural helmets?
So the structural helmets are probably gonna be the wildland helmets.
Mhm.
And those are past their date. So we have to replace those about every 15 years, and some of those are 17 to 20 years old now.
Okay.
The PPE, they've reached their dates, and I have been unsuccessful, unfortunately, with the AFG grant, the Assistance of Firefighters Grant. And any other grant out there to try and get our turnout gear replaced in a big lump sum. So I'm having to do it just about 5 at a time, basically, and that's what this is.
So what would happen if you didn't receive the grant?
If we didn't receive this grant, it would be coming out of our operational budget, because we are now at a situation where these turnouts are no longer compliant. The ones we're rotating out. We just ordered 6 sets. And that's going to allow us to take some of the sets that our captains are wearing and give them that second set so we can rotate gear should we get back-to-back calls like that. And then it gives us a few more to hand down that are still in compliance and rotate some of the non-compliant 15-plus-year-old turnouts out of service.
So why weren't they in the operational budget to begin with? If
They were this year.
if they were.
We ordered 6 sets.
So why are we amending why do we need to do this if they were already,
So because we need 20 sets of turnouts.
okay, so why don't we have everything? One, like,
I just tried to keep the budget as limited as possible and not one big impact like that. And now it gives us kind of a rotation schedule to where we're not getting hit all at once. Excuse me, all at once for the big hit on turnouts and helmets. We replaced all of our structural helmets last year or the year before. And so that was a big hit. And then some turnouts. This is another 5 or 6 turnouts. And then we're gonna do another 5 turnouts with this.
And we've had grant applications pending for additional turnouts.
I've got a grant in right now with AFG to try and get 25 sets of turnouts. So, yeah, it's the balance of waiting for those grants and then still needing the turnouts to be rotated out.
so let me just read this. It says below is the list of items that are needed by Templeton Fire and Emergency Services to continue to operate safely. This will not replace all the needed items, but it will keep us in compliance by replacing outdated or deteriorated PPEs. So to me, it just means that we're just trying to basically get to minimal amount of compliance. That means, right?
Correct.
And that doesn't sell well too well for me.
Agreed.
So. I mean, I just cannot imagine one day, God forbid, one of our firefighters gets hurt. Something happens and comes back that we were below standards or we could have been done better, but we just kept everything to minimal. So, I mean, I do appreciate that you're trying to keep things limited, but I personally want to see what we need. I mean, if you have a list of the stuff that we need, the costs that we need, I like to see them. I mean, I think we all do.
To be compliant.
Yeah, to be compliant, to make sure we could.
Oh, I can
operate safe.
definitely put that together. As far as the turnouts are concerned, I can assure the board that we have nobody in non-compliant turnouts right now. But we are, as we get closer to that last few sets that are coming out of compliance, that are now 14 years old, these 5 that we'll order with this will get us within compliance to the ones that are about 13 years old. And then I have another few more sets that have to be rotated out before we have to order new.
Yeah, but
Again, I was trying to do that all within the guides of the budget. Now,
so this sentence here says this will not replace all the needed items. I mean, are there other items as well then besides the structural? I mean, that.
absolutely, yeah. Right now I have a grant in for $275,000 through AFG for SCBA's, our self-contained breathing apparatus, because they're reaching their deadline.
Was anybody aware of that? You guys? Because, I mean, during the budget, when budget comes, we're given the budget, and it just seems like things look rosy, everything is fine, everything is good, and I mean, I like to know this stuff, because we make decisions that we choose to spend money here or money there, or, put certain money in certain account, and I mean, safety to me, very important, so I mean, I know it's bad, 270,000 or whatever, but I mean, we had one year. The Parks and Rec Department was 250,000 in hole, and it came to us and we dealt with it.
Mhm.
So I mean, I like to know, I mean, I'd rather know, okay, fire department's account, budget is in hole, and let's figure out what we could do, but our firefighters need to be safe.
Yeah, first and foremost, the priority is the fire engine, because that is the critical aspect. So that's, as the fire committee heard this last time around,
So
that is my number one priority. That fire engine has to be replaced. We're in a situation where it can't go any further as a frontline engine. So I'm not trying to pile anything more on top of that, but the 275,000, those SCBA's will last another 2. And I think I have a couple that will last 3 years, or a couple, probably 4 or 5 that will last 3 years more, before they're completely out of compliance. Does that mean that, that they won't work? No, because we continually get them repaired, but we're sending more and more to get repaired annually. So yeah, they're reaching a point where they're gonna hit that point of, they're so old, they're not gonna be able to be repaired also.
So do we have that documented to say what are all those equipments that to keep us in compliance? Cause I'm concerned from a liability standpoint and safety of our firefighters. But do we have an inventory of all those items and when they will cycle out and need to be replaced, so you can kind of forecast when you need to replace those items?
Yeah.
In the event that you retire and
Right.
move on.
And that was one of the things I did when I first got here. I
Okay.
took an inventory of everything, said, here is the absolute has to be replaced. And I came to the board at that point, it was some hose, a variety of other things, about 3 years ago that I said, look, we need to spend X amount of dollars to replace these items just to get us to a point where we can continue safely. Because we had hose that was popping, literally on firegrounds. And so that got replaced, that got dealt with. Now we're on a rotation to cycle hose in and out as need be. With regards to the turnouts, that's about an every 5-year to 10-year type thing, where turnouts will wear out. And typically it's a rotation of reserves and full-time staff that get it rotated out, so it's not one big lump hit. Then SCBA's, those have been an issue since I've been here, but they aren't gonna reach that out of compliance date from NFPA for another 2 years, but this next year will be the cutoff for the grant. So I'm hoping that this next AFG grant will solve that issue. If it doesn't, then I'm gonna be coming before the board and saying, this is an absolute need. And, you know.
I mean,
we'll have
so
to
are
address it.
are there any other items that, I mean, I'm fine with getting this through. I'm not saying not to do this, but I'm just concerned if there are any other items that need to be for us to be looked at.
Those are the big ticket items. So our PPE, stuff like our medical jackets, those are typically replaced about every 5 to 6 years. Those are coming up, but that's $3,000 to $4,000. The turnouts, like everything else, have gone up about 45%. So where we were paying $2,500 for a set of turnouts when I first took this job, we're paying about $4,200 for a set of turnouts now. And that's just jacket and pants. That doesn't even include the boots and the helmet. And so those are just the prices increases we're looking at. As far as any other type of critical piece of equipment, no, I mean, that pretty much addresses it. As soon as we replace the SCBA's, that puts us in compliance with NFPA as far as the age of the SCBA's. It also helps us to be compliant with our neighbors, to be able to do what we call buddy breathing, because our SCBA's don't match up with our neighboring.
So the grant is gonna be a 50, even if we get the grant, it's probably gonna be a 50-50, right? We have
No,
to put
the
it-
AFG is only 5%
Okay, it's only.
match.
But we didn't, we've applied for that before, and as a matter of fact, we were partially awarded it.
Yep.
But it had very limited uses last time, and it didn't include the SCBA's or the turnouts.
Okay.
So we resubmit and.
Yep.
And
As a matter of fact, I tried to get the turnouts replaced on that, and they said that was not a qualifier. And that's why we went after the airfill station. And then we had the resident that, bought us the airfill station. Well, we came back and I asked the FEMA grant folks, and I said, what's acceptable? What's something that will qualify? And they told me the radios. If we weren't P25 compliant with our dual band radios, that we needed to step those up, and that's why we went after the $50,000 in radio replacement.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I mean, obviously, you're putting a lot of thoughts and effort into this, how to move forward, but if there is anything critical that you need, please, we have a supportive board here, so please bring it to us and let us, we'll, we have to figure it out, we just don't want our firefighters being out there.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, and I know I've got the board support, so, and the department appreciates that. And I will, if it's something that, before it becomes critical.
Yeah.
I plan on bringing it to the board and, but I'm trying to find other ways to fund these things
Okay.
without coming
All right.
to the board first.
Yeah, I was just reading that paragraph there, I'm just like, yeah, it just didn't make me feel good, so I'm glad at least I hear that, you're managing it, so you can let us know, thank you. I'm done, so I mean, if everyone else is okay, I'll
Make a motion to approve it.
yeah, I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Mr. Bozanic?
Aye.
Mr. Deeney?
Yes.
Milligan?
Aye.
Pearson? Aye. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, our business item, citizens internal standing committees.
Yeah, just I think a really relatively interesting topic. So just by way of background, and certainly the board's aware of this. Historically, our internal committees were made up of board members only. And when in those meetings are called on an as-needed basis with no set time, they're treated as special meetings with a minimum of 24-hour notice under the Brown Act. And again, prior to 2023, staff would identify the committee members, the necessary staff, any consultants or others that would need to be there, and then work with those various members to set a date and call the meeting, and they were generally held. And at least in my tenure here, we didn't have much of a problem with getting meetings scheduled within a reasonable period of time. About a year ago, it was suggested, or the board discussed and ultimately decided to add residents to also be committee members for two reasons. To increase public participation at those meetings, and secondly, to hopefully generate some additional future interest in serving on the board by having kind of an opportunity to learn a little bit about the district through the committees before deciding whether to throw someone's hat, their sort of hat the ring to run for the board or get appointed for the board. And so you appointed persons on three separate committees of the district. We have a fourth committee that doesn't have a resident on it. And since then, it has been more challenging. Really, I think for the first half of this, it's just more people to schedule, so more calendars. And some of our committee members are retired, and so they don't have they have a lot of long periods of time when they're not available, travel for a month or longer. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge. Generally, that's not been harmful. It's the frustrating part of this. I talked to Carrie about, because she's the one, we've come up with the system of using Doodle poll, and we think it's simple and easier than trying to list a bunch of dates and stuff. And we've come up with, really lots of date and time options. Maybe it looks intimidating, and so we'd like some feedback on that. In terms of when you look at that list, is it like overwhelming? But trying to come up with, lots of dates and times over a couple week period. And the challenge has not been in communicating with these folks. It's really been waiting for the responses. We've had, sometimes it's been a week or more before a committee member would submit their responses, and by then we're already into the periods of time we wanted to hold the committee, only to find out that we don't have a date that works for everybody. Our goal has been to set a date that would work for all committee members. But I've been willing, should it be necessary, to call a meeting that didn't have everybody able to participate, as long as we looked like we could have a quorum. That's been one of the challenges, really. I think just the delay, just the more people involved, not a set time. Some folks that were absent for extended periods of time, like traveling. And then perhaps some people might not be giving us all their availability, like, well, my preference would be to have a meeting at 3 o'clock that day. Not realizing that we're working with maybe 8 or 10 calendars. And so it's pretty hard to identify these dates. So that's one issue, sort of just I think the most frustrating part, if there is a frustrating part, it's just been lack of responsiveness from the committee from persons responding to the poll. They're not getting back to us right away.
Is that, I'm sorry, is that from the board members or from resident? Or,
Sometimes it's from either. I would be, and we, in some cases we've had to, call or text or try to prompt a response because we're like waiting on, one person or something. Don't want to be pushy, but we've had to, prompt. We've had a case just recently where each time, this happened to be a resident, but each time an email went out with that sort of availability request, it was a whole week before we were back. So that's a long time when you're trying to coordinate a meeting. So that's one set of issues, and I don't know if there's a solution to that. I think again, we'd be willing to call a meeting even without having 100% participation, as long as we thought we'd have a quorum if an item were pressing. In other words, we really needed to get it through the committee to get it to the board or something of that nature, or I'd be willing to just bring an item directly to the board that would have normally gone to the committee because of an inability to get a committee meeting scheduled. The board meetings, we know they're hard calendared and they're easier to plan for. The second issue is a little more specific. We had a meeting set again after a couple of weeks of picking dates, like 6 weeks out, again, because people were gone some really extended periods of time. And we set a meeting, and we actually, in this case, posted an agenda, maybe 4 or 5 days prior to the meeting, and then learned that for one committee member wasn't going to make it. Well, we were still planning on holding the committee meeting because it was already set. But then a second committee member couldn't make it due to a conflict, with just like a day or two's notice. So in that case, that committee is made up of 4 persons. And we had 2 people who were going to miss it, and so we didn't have a quorum, or we didn't expect a quorum, so we had to cancel that meeting and reschedule. And it took another couple weeks to reschedule it. Again, in large part, there was a lack of an inability to have certainty about setting the meeting because of this sort of slow responsiveness by, in that case, just one resident committee member. We hoped and prodded along and got it, and all the committee, that meeting was held and it all worked out. But in hindsight, I really think that as you think about 2024, maybe beyond, at least for this sort of second issue, the issue of quorum, avoiding like a committee makeup of 4. If that committee makeup would have been 3, 2 out of 3 is 66%, but in order to have a committee of 4, it takes 3 out of 4 or 75% participation. So I think we're less likely to miss a quorum if the committee is made up of 3 persons or 5 persons. A 4 is just a bad, it's just, you need 3 out of 4 to have a quorum. So I don't know if that's not so I was just thinking about what are some of the options. I think in that case, if the board's goal is to continue to have residents on committees with the goal of creating with a secondary goal of creating more interest in serving on the board. There are some options like, okay, we could, if there's multiple parties interested, one of the, and there were like in this, like in the case of our fire committee where we have two citizens on it. We could have appointed one of them as an alternate. They could still both attend and both participate, but only one would vote. And then a quorum issue would be far less challenging, because as long as we had two persons here, we could hold the meeting.
So my recommendation would be not to expand it to 5, but make it 3, and at least 2 board members should be making up that quorum, because all of our committees have at least 2 board members. And we don't hold that committee meeting unless we have the 2 board members present. At least that's what we did previously. And I think we should still allow the community representatives, but there be 1 voting member. Anyone else, if there's more community members, they're just alternates with no voting.
Well, they
So we need
would
to-
vote if they were serving.
If they were serving in place of the primary representative. So that would be my recommendation. Then it's fewer people. The other is in terms of sending out the notice. I don't recall that there being in that email a date by which to respond. And I would say that that needs to be included if it's not, but I don't recall it being in.
I don't think it probably has been.
But we should tell people when do they need to respond by. And if the 2 board members respond and the community representative doesn't, then the meeting should be scheduled. Cause I hate to see us hold up our business in the district because the community representatives are not actively participating. And certainly they're volunteering their time, so they may not be as committed, but the whole purpose of why we wanted the community representatives is to get people engaged and have an opportunity to learn about the district. But I would say that if they become a hindrance, then I think we need to kind of move beyond. But I think we still need to welcome them into the meetings and have 1 voting member and alternate, and as many alternates as they need to be.
Yeah,
But
so,
only 1
so
voting member.
you might recall you amended your bylaws to accommodate this, and I'm trying to listen to the input and determine if changes would require a bylaw change. And I think what you described could be implemented in practice without changing the bylaw. It's just more of like just holding yourself to, no, we're gonna appoint 1. Our goal is to appoint 1 committee member to 1 public member to each committee, and also an alternate, even though the bylaws allow for more than 1. And we could try that and see if that kind of helps.
I think we have to change the bylaw because we want to limit the board to 3, a community member and an alternate. We're being really kind of detailed in how we want to structure it, and I would think that that would probably have to be incorporated in our
I would agree.
bylaws.
I would agree.
And then on top of that, I don't know, maybe we need to discuss if a community member is starting to be a hindrance or there's absences or whatnot. We don't necessarily have that addressed either. Whereas here at the board level, if you miss 2 meetings, you can risk being removed. We don't really have a removal procedure for a committee member either, or a community member. So that's probably something else that we probably need to talk about too, and if we're gonna go into the bylaws anyway.
I think that's a good point, but also I think what the point that you made, as long as the 2 board members are available, you should
There's a
let the
quorum.
meeting, yeah, there's a quorum, it's considered quorum, and the meeting couldn't happen, so that kind of could solve that problem,
Yeah.
but still.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
if we're
mind.
saying there's 3 on the
Yeah.
committee, 2 board members would make that quorum.
So,
You
yeah,
just wouldn't wanna have
So we
1
don't have
board
to worry
member
about
and 1
removal.
community representative.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I
Well-
think we should document it in the bylaws. Because this is how we're going to operate. And so I think it should be reflected there.
Yeah,
We don't have the bylaws.
so, yeah, the bylaws were written a little, we amended them to give you some broader discretion about appointing committee members, but it's up to, it reads up to 3 per committee. I think in the case of just as a reminder, the committee member, the board committee members sort of have a built-in alternate with the board president, the board vice president being a backup. Although we have a case right now where the board president and the board vice president make up, or both on the committee, so there is no alternate for one of them. And that may be just another thing to keep in mind to avoid that scenario where both the board president and the vice president serve together on a committee, because under that, again, under that arrangement, there isn't an alternate for either of them. So it's kind of we haven't ran into a problem with that, but as you start to think about alternates and trying to make sure that committee meetings happen, that's another scenario where, you know, that we could kind of clean up. I think that the issue where we had to lost the meeting was really kind of an unusual one in that we had all four committee members had confirmed a date and time. And then we posted an agenda, and then a couple of two persons were lost. Coming into that meeting, one due to a death in the family and one due to maybe a family medical issue that wasn't foreseen 6 weeks prior when they agreed to that date and time. I mean, I think that's another little challenge, is because of the challenge in creating the meeting to begin with, we're looking further and further out. Sometimes, like in that case, I believe it was about 6 weeks out from when we started requesting dates and time. So,
I mean, yeah, that's another thing. I don't think we should go that far out.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So it makes
Exactly, yeah,
less-
because then-
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fire committee, when I got, it was like
Yeah.
from now until March of next
Yeah.
year, and I'm like, I'm tired of checking these boxes.
Yeah.
And so it was like,
Well, I think if we say you respond by this date, and then
Yeah,
also
put it
kind
in
of
that
changing the rules and making up a quorum.
well, I think,
Because the fire committee, we had 2 members of the public on that too, which I think made it more
It does.
difficult.
yeah,
So
I think,
if we lessen the number of people to make up the quorum, and if we say that the quorum primarily is 2 board members, then we're back down to a smaller group.
what's the alternative?
Well, no, having an alternate.
Well,
available to three and-
even having I think the community member is a nice to have. It's not really, even though we're giving them voting rights, it's a nice to have. That's why we've included them, to try and get them engaged. But I don't think it should become a hindrance to the district doing its business. So if they can't make the date that the 2 board members can, then we move forward.
yeah, I think in the case of the the biggest problem was at the fire committee, where we happen to have 2 members, and I think the solution of having, if there were 2 persons interested, one appointed as a member, one appointed as an alternate, again, we would still absolutely encourage their participation, both members. It's not uncommon, the structure of the alternate it's not uncommon to have alternates in attendance and participating. There's just only one, if the primary person is there, the alternate can't cast a formal vote.
Yeah.
Because I think your primary goal was to get people more engaged at the committee level so that they could maybe later on serve on the board. And if we had an active alternate, they'd be equally aware of what's going on. And I don't see at least at the fire committee, where we've had this issue of the fire committee, that it would change the structure a whole heck of a lot. But we would have, in that case, we still would have had a quorum and could have held the earlier meeting date.
Well, I think too, I know it's hard on Carrie and you, but maybe saying, okay, we're sending it out this date, you have to respond by this date, then just give us 1 month or maybe 6 weeks.
Well, we haven't given them all. I mean, we've tried to give it like 2-week windows, but when there are times when there isn't enough persons available during those, so we come up with more. I have not wanted to give they've already looked like a long list, sometimes 100 options. They're not really 100 unique dates and times, because we say 9:30, 11:30, 10 to noon, they're overlapping. But we've taken that approach, and you can tell us if it looks irritating or maybe that's intimidating, just to be able to, maybe somebody can't make it to noon, but they can make it to 11:30, and so we can find a time that might work. And we're also trying to hold, instead of just a beginning time, kind of a 2-hour block, so we know we have enough time to get it,
Right.
whatever the agenda is, to get it in.
So I'm just looking at the bylaws, and the bylaws would have to be changed. It's 4060.2.6, because it says each internal standing committee shall be comprised of 2 board members and up to 3 members of the public. who shall be age 16 or older and residents of TPSD. Qualified residents shall be solicited by the district annually. The board of directors will consider appointing members of the public to the standing committees each January for the calendar year and may consider additional appointments throughout the year, and that's all it says. So that needs to be embellished, to really get to, we'll have one member of the committee as a voting member, and then anyone else, who's part of the public who qualifies will be, an alternate, and may attend the meetings, but, will not be able to vote unless that, primary person is not present.
Because then somebody could say, well, like,
Yeah,
well,
and
I
if
wanna
there's-
be on there and the bylaw says up to 3,
Yeah.
so why aren't you?
And,
putting
and
me
we'll
on
have
there?
to number the alternates if there's, 4 alternates, if we should get so lucky. To say, what's the pecking order of the alternates in terms of having a voting? But it also needs to state that the quorum for these committees will be the 2 board members.
Well, so so I think that's a tricky issue with under the Brown Act, because these are, if they're a committee member, they're used to determine the quorum. Are you saying
Okay,
that?
then if that's an issue under the Brown Act, then we'll deal with that. But I'm saying is that this one paragraph is not sufficient for what we're discussing in terms of.
It wasn't written under this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now that we're coming into these obstacles, I think we need to address it by making some policy changes, and this particular section needs to be rewritten. So that's my point.
What is the Brown Act issue that you're raising
Well-
regarding a community?
Well, I just want to make sure that, I think what board member Logan is stating is that the quorum shall be determined by the 2 board members present. And I guess the concerning thing is that if we have a committee that has three voting members, 2 board members and a resident member, and a resident and a board member came, that is, that would
That
mean,
needs
that
to
means a
be-
That
quorum.
needs to be
That would-
the
Yeah.
quorum.
That would be a quorum instead of, so if one board member didn't show up and we couldn't find an alternate for him, we'd still be able to move forward with the committee meeting because we'd have 2 out of 3 attendees.
But that's okay, because really the committees are just making recommendations to the board.
Right,
They're not doing
I-
final action.
And also, as we have alternates,
Right,
so.
and we have an alternate
yeah,
on the
so
board, so,
Odds are that you could get somebody.
yeah.
Yeah, we, I think historically, we've been able to, as long as we get notice in advance that someone's not gonna make it.
Yeah, we've never had any problems, so.
So I think the problem's unique, the response, so we can certainly add a kind of a respond by date, and that might create a greater sense of urgency in responding to the email. Is that system working for you at least, that sort of
Yes.
doodle poll? Does it seem overly complex or challenging?
But I have to agree with Director Giardini, is when we're getting out 6 weeks, it's like, what do I know what's gonna happen in 6 weeks' time?
hate it.
But it's going through and doing all the check marks. It takes a long time, and it's looking at, trying to look at my calendar and then doing that, it's like, okay, how far out am I going? And sometimes it becomes, kind of.
I mean, it's a universal thing that we use these days in business, and so I think it's the best way to approach it.
That's what they do.
I just don't like it when it goes out
Too
months.
far.
And so, I think in general, it's probably the best system that we can use. I like the 2-hour slots that, you're putting out. And so I think what happened to the fire and rec committee was really an anomaly. A death and a sickness of all of a sudden isn't gonna happen very often, but we should try and protect it. But I think what we came up with here about having 2 board members, a person from the community, and then anybody else being an alternate is a good thing. Change the bylaws to reflect that. And basically, I think if you go anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks out on that scheduling thing, we're good.
Yeah, so if the direction in general is that, look, as long as the 2 board members are available, you don't care, I don't say you don't care, you'd like to have the committee meeting, even if the primary person isn't available. well, you know, we would just we would just do our best to make sure one of the alternates is available, if there are any, or just hold it and you know,
Right.
the whole, you know, I guess one thing that's kind of, and I don't know that this is being used much, but every meeting now is
Right,
fully
no.
recorded. Anybody, even if you don't attend the meeting, can get totally caught up on your own time, just watch the YouTube video and you can watch what happened and you wouldn't fall, you would have maybe not been able to participate, but not fallen behind.
Right.
I mean, to me, if you could get the 2 board members and, you know, and have the meeting as soon as possible, that's fine, you know, but.
So
So like.
the public member is just not, they're a full member, but it's not viewed as critical to have their participation.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, cause I think we can't have that be a.
Well, it's not critical to schedule the meeting. I think, saying it's not critical for participation, I guess it's important.
Yeah.
To the
The
schedule.
phrasing, yeah, for the
Yeah.
scheduling, for scheduling purposes,
Yes.
their availability is not critical.
Yes.
So if they all of a sudden they have to be 6 weeks out, but the board members could be available within a week or 2.
Yeah.
Then we should do it within a week.
To be, like, again, we've had some members have been very upfront and say, hey, I'm gonna be gone a whole month. I don't care if you schedule without me being available. I totally understand. And I think we could maintain, you know, a good rapport, a good relation with that committee member, because they would understand that they're, you know, if they go to Greece for 6 weeks, that was not something that we would have anticipated, that kind of lack of availability.
Can I go with them?
Yeah, no. We're gonna have it over there. We're having a meeting over
You know
there.
what?
But again, I wanna reiterate, it's not, the challenge, the challenge is really, before this issue with the fire committee, the challenge was we just have more calendars to coordinate, and it's not just the citizens, the residents on the committee, it's board members, it's our own availability, the staff's availability. I guess the other thing is we try and, you know, we try to hold these during the day, so that's a limiting factor. In the case of this most recent fire committee, we had to kind of extend that, we had one person who could do it at 4. So we reached back out to the other committee members and said, can you make it a little bit later than we had originally sought direction on. So we made it work. I think it's been going okay. Absent this fire committee.
But I mean, I remember previously though, like when I got the notice, I had like 5 choices, 6 choices, and we were able to schedule within a couple of weeks. So now I see the difference where, okay, I get all that and then still have to go out a fair amount of time. So that surprises me. So
Yeah, again, I think that
that's definitely.
if you think about it, the makeup of who we've appointed, these folks that have, well, I mean, 2 of the 3 committee members are retired and have, you know, they didn't kind of make the kind of commitment to Templeton CSD that you made.
Yeah.
And so they're booking 2-month trips to Florida and things like that, and so they weren't that available. I think I'll try to take a stab at making it clear, and certainly we can do so in the communication to newly appointed committee members that we're looking for your participation. However, if the matter needs to move forward, if we've been directed to go ahead and hold the meeting, if you happen to not be available during the window of time that we're trying to hold the committee
Well,
meeting.
it falls under the Brown Act, because if the 2 board members are available, then we've got a
You
quorum.
have quorum.
So rather than telling them,
That basically you're irrelevant. It's not really sending a positive message.
right, I would
Well,
just
but it's
just
also
say,
like they
We're
were
gonna
important
adhere to
to
the
them.
form requirements of the Brown
Right.
Act and just kind of leave it
at
as
that.
that. I hate using this word of like they're insignificant or they're not critical,
Right.
because they are important. That's why we created this, is because we
Right.
wanted to engage the community, so. I think the way it's being presented is a little
I
off-putting,
think,
but
yeah, you don't have to say that.
No,
just
I
say
mean,
as long as you have
it's a
quorum.
quorum issue. That's what we're trying to address. The Brown Act requires two members, and, you know, internally our policy is if it's the board members, we're good to go to schedule. But yeah, I would hate to tell somebody that, their
Right.
attendance is not critical.
Well, that's been, I mean, again, our goal has been to try to get, that's been part of the reason why it's been long, is because we've tried to work around all the committee members' availability.
Yeah, I support Director Logan's suggestions in regards to the modifications of the bylaws and the one community member with the alternates and.
So you've got your direction and you're gonna have to come back to the board, because this is For discussion of direction.
Yeah, I just wanna, I'm gonna reread our, cause we were also asked last year to try to get the word out earlier so that not, I guess, nomination period is not the right term, the residents would see the opportunity to serve on committees before the holidays kind of hit. And so I'm gonna reread this, make sure that it's, you know, that they may be appointed as a member or alternate or something like that. 'Cause I wanna
One
get,
suggestion I would do is break up that paragraph to say, what's the eligibility requirement to be a community representative? And then talk about the scheduling of the meetings and the attendance to break it up that way. Cause right now that paragraph has it all together
I'm
in the bylaws.
I was actually referring to like our press release and other
Oh.
things to recruit members.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah,
and the other thing with, speaking of, recruiting people, is 3 of board members will be up for reelection. And so we also talked about in the past is having a communication going out in probably the springtime about, when somebody, if anybody's interested in serving on the board. So. Recall that?
Vaguely.
Okay, because we talked about providing the time frame of when that person would have to express, if they wanted to file with the county. But if they wanted to
Like
be,
something that would go like in our utility bill.
it could go in the utility bill or
Press
be a
release.
press release.
And proud, I mean, press releases. It's big, aren't they, in the newspaper? I don't even know where they are.
Well, it's just voluntarily carried, right? Press release.
Even our
We-
website.
You can put it in the.
Oh, we post all the press releases on the website.
Yeah, the website, I mean, I just think that we need to let people know that, how they can serve, but they would have to know, you know, what is the role of the board? What does the district do?
It's be July, it'll, not
Yeah.
until July and August.
Yeah,
Is it until July or August you have?
Yeah.
So it's pretty far.
Yeah.
but if somebody wants to learn more about it,
Right.
then they can meet with the general manager and ask questions and express interest and know whether or not to throw their hat in the ring.
Yeah, or maybe attend the committee, yeah.
After that.
And they may choose to come to our meetings.
Yeah, look at them.
So, I'll revise the press release. We still, you still wanna, it sounds like we still wanna have members serving, you still wanna encourage participation. Encourage members of the public on the committees, and we'll make some tweaks to the bylaws to match the discussion tonight. Your intent is to appoint one and any others that are interested as alternates.
Yeah.
And we've kind of modified the application. I may make it clear that they may be appointed as a committee member or an alternate. Something like that.
And then the alternates have to be kind of sequential.
Yeah, if we
Say,
have
what's the
multiple
pecking order?
alternates,
Yeah.
sure, you have an alternate 1, 2, 3, something like that.
Yeah.
I'll confirm that that's all possible. I think it is. It's just like, we wouldn't have had that issue, right? With, so far, we only have one committee that has 2 members of the public on it. So we would have had a primary and an alternate, and, you know, I don't know if we're gonna have how many folks are gonna step forward, next, you know, the next couple months for 2024, either way.
Understood.
But yeah, it's a little more cumbersome, but it's still doable. And I think, you know, in looking at the ways, I guess just rewinding the clock a year ago when we had this first discussion, you know, we kind of took a middle ground. We knew of other communities that had committees that were, you know, like in Cambria's case, that were primarily not board members on committees, and those have standing meetings set times monthly. And I know, like in the case of Los Osos, they have committee meetings that also have members of the public on them, and they either meet monthly or every other month. And in our case, that we you know, we didn't have that sort of need or that level of wouldn't necessarily always have something meaningful to discuss with a committee that frequently, and so we kind of kept it more fluid. And that's probably part of the challenge, is because when a member of the public signs up, they don't know when the meetings are gonna be held.
Could you not schedule them every 2 months and then just cancel if you don't need one? I mean, to me, if I was the public and wanted to volunteer, I'd want to know that every other month on the second Thursday of the month at 2 o'clock is my meeting time. And then I think all the meetings, if you're scheduling them every 2 months, it'd be very easy just to cancel a meeting if not needed.
Yeah, that's another alternative, that's another option.
I mean,
That's a good idea.
then I don't have to do the doodle. The first doodle thing.
That's
You
the
don't
board
know
members.
why, yeah, you just turned
Yeah.
out computer challenged.
Not just,
Yeah, the first doodle I had to do, 6 weeks or something, every day. It was.
You're not gonna get any sympathy from us.
Crazy.
I mean, yeah, with
my
the,
life.
That's all been there.
with the same meeting that we have, that's like said Wednesdays, you know, first Wednesday of, you know, quarter, we had that meeting,
Right,
so
and
you
then-
know, you put it down.
On your calendar and then it gets
Although,
canceled.
yeah,
They've
exactly.
been mostly canceled, but
Yeah, I don't know what, yeah, we're gonna talk about that. I was gonna ask you, I haven't heard anything for a while, but yeah, so I mean, I think it'd be a good idea.
that's an all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be difficult for the board members here if we didn't have a set schedule every month and said, okay. We're gonna fill out the doodle every month and see when you're available.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then I think that also helps in the sense that I feel like, a lot of times the committee meetings that we have, there are a lot of items on there. And it takes a while to go through it and, you know, you feel like you're hurried, so maybe if we have a set time and, you know, that way, you know, maybe, you know, that way we could. get
Is that
this done.
something you want us to explore internally, or is that something you wanna put in place and include in the bylaws, and we could. Between now and when this comes back to you, actually come up with the calendar and,
when you say explore, what do you mean?
well. I haven't discussed this with the staff about, okay, well, you know, I think it's doable, it's just a matter of picking dates and times that work. For committee meetings and kind of planning out a calendar. What it means is really kind of holding, since we have 4 committees, if they met every other month, it'd be 2 committee meetings a month. You know.
But
two
you
committees
wouldn't
would mean
really
January.
have them.
Right, but we have to then hold the calendar, right? We have to hold the calendar the same way. that you
Calendar
do.
would have to be held open and you could potentially have them.
Right.
The downside may be that in between months, if something comes up. It's likely would just go before the board. Instead
Or
of
a special
maybe
meeting,
with something.
you still hold a special committee meeting,
Well,
outside of that
yeah.
calendar. It just would, then we're back to the whole doodle, you know, trying to determine availability.
I mean, you
I
could-
still don't know, do you think and again, I think we'd have to include that in the materials to go out to the public, that these are the meeting dates, so
Right,
they know they're
right.
available. And I don't know that it would you know, if you're Jerry Gast and you're on the fire committee meeting and you see that in November of 2024, on the 12th of November, there's gonna be a meeting at 2 o'clock, is he gonna decide, is he gonna really hold that date a year from now open, or is he gonna plan his life and miss the meeting? It probably won't.
Yeah,
Well, that's no different than with the board members.
I think-
We're
I
gonna,
think-
if, we know what our meetings are, and if we have something really important on one of them 6 months from now, we're gonna just not. go to
I
the
don't
meeting.
think it's not gonna be the driver that gets somebody to say, oh, I wanna serve on the committee. It
It's
just
just
really
easier to
becomes a
calendar.
scheduling,
Yeah.
it's just a scheduling convenience is what it is.
And you could have 2 a month, so every month you're gonna have 2 meetings instead of.
Yeah,
You
we
have
played
4
last week.
committees,
Yeah, like we had 3 committee meetings, well, we had, what it was measure eight.
whatever.
So, yeah, it's, there are a few options. I think if they were scheduled. It might be easier for members of the public to identify if they were available or interested in serving. I'm just noting that as an issue. So we can hold that in our back pocket and implement it in 2025 if the changes we talked about earlier don't work. Or we could implement that now along with these other changes. For 2024.
And I think if you wanna schedule them, we need to wait after the board members are appointed, so that way you know, the specific board members are attending each committee, that, you know, because each one's schedule is different, so that way you could coordinate it. So
I'd
some
say,
people could be like on Thursdays, some people could be Wednesdays or something like that.
I think we should just shorten the number of options. And not go 6 weeks out, just 4 weeks out, period, and trying to schedule and just keep it the way we have it. Because to your point, it's, you know, we're gonna be reshuffling
Yeah.
committees potentially at the first of the year, in which case you raise a good point is, would it work for us on that particular date and time? And what would be the time? You know, I think the changes that we've already discussed, those changes should address all of the.
Yeah, they should prevent you from having to wait months to hold a meeting.
So,
So we'll just, I think I've got my marching orders and we'll come back to you then. Before the appointment of committees with some with proposed bylaw changes. And we'll begin to reach out to notify the public that this opportunity to serve on committees. Exists for 2024 and ask for their interest and notify the current committee members to ask for their renewed, or ask them to indicate their interest in continuing to serve.
so it'll be a future agenda item.
It will.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. General managers report.
Yeah, just a couple of items I wanted to call to your attention. One, you may have seen that or you may recall that we approved a resolution, the board approved a resolution to indicate our potential interest in a county-wide or a regional desal project that was, that's really conceptual, right, in nature. The county would apply, then took all the interest, most of the agencies in the county and in some in northern Santa Barbara indicated in regional interest. County took that and applied for a competitive grant and received a grant. So that study or that effort will be moving forward. The grant does not fund construction of desal, it's just to identify potential locations and partners and some of the hurdles. So that has been funded and looks like it will be moving forward. I don't know what that will entail of staff or as far as the firmness of our commitment. Our resolution didn't have a lot to it. It was just like, hey, we want to stay in to learn more. Veterans Day is this Saturday and it's observed on Friday. District offices will be closed. Just wanted to alert you to that. And then a reminder that the holiday dinner, the TCSD holiday dinner, will be on December 7th. And we'll be getting a formal invitation out. We got to save the date out several months ago, so hopefully you have that on your calendar already. But that's Thursday, December 7th, a month from today.
Where is it being held at?
McPhee's.
December 7th, Thursday?
Yes.
I don't have it.
We'll send a doodle poll out.
Do we? I know, we didn't get
I have it on my calendar.
We did get a save the
You didn't
date.
get the invite?
Apparently not. We didn't, so we've expanded, we've got more and more participants and we haven't finalized all the details, but but we'll get that out included with the invitation. We ended up playing a couple games last year, not a white elephant type exchange, just because we've made this now available to all of our reserve firefighters and we had a decent turnout of them last year. So we've got like about 50 some people that attended at least last year. So it became we thought too large for that gift exchange concept last year, but we can revisit that. And if there's a lot of interest in doing so, we can put it back in play.
You weren't supposed to discuss that when the meeting was here.
Oh.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we took it out was because again, more people really like close to 60 instead of about 40. And then secondly, we're holding this on a weeknight instead of a Friday night. And so the interest was trying to not have it go so late.
So late, because gift exchange takes.
It takes a long time. It took quite a while. And we explored because of it. We explored holding it on a Friday night. It's just the minimum tab is a lot higher on a Friday for McPhee's. So would have been exposed to some bigger bill.
Yeah.
Now, those are all the items I have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, committee reports. We have a TAG committee report and a fire and emergency management committee report. Any questions about those or comments from anybody?
I have comments.
Sure.
Just on the fire committee report, I really want everybody to pay attention to, budgeting on this because, the committee spent a lot of time looking at, how much money is in the capital improvement funds and how much we're laying out for the fire truck, which we agreed to put out, and then where the funding is coming from to cover the asset replacement. And so, you know, kind of my standard thing is, in the out assignment, we did make money, but we didn't know how much money yet. And then where that money's gonna be placed in which fund is just not certain yet. The SAFER grant, you know, we did tell them that we couldn't afford to carry those people if, we didn't get another SAFER grant, so they're aware of that. You know, we did notice that, or I noticed, and I think our committee noticed that all the other fire departments we looked at had 2 type 1 fire trucks, so we were actually below in that. And then on the last item, when is the audit gonna be done?
We're hoping to bring it before the board on December 5th.
Yeah, okay. And so, you know, I have this overall concern because the drainage and the lighting are gonna go down, and then our fire department is, you know, we also looked at how much the CFDs can fund the fire department when we did it through the Lepskovich person, whatever her last name, that person, the person who helped us set that up. And so General Manager Brote says that he thinks that the fees can carry us through to make the fire department whole until 29-30 budget, but there's other things. And so I still think we need to hold, like maybe after February or March, when we see how many water meters we're gonna release, to see where that income's coming in, what that'll generate, have some kind of budget meeting outside of our May-June budget meeting to discuss how are we going to fund these things to support our fire department, because I just see it not adding up correctly.
So I agree with what you've just said, and one of the things that we talked about at the fire committee meeting was looking at the model, because the numbers were from March of 2023, and one of the recommendations or requests that we had made as a committee is to update that with the year-end audited numbers. And so I'm looking at future agenda items, and 2 things. We have the authorization for to place order for a type 1 engine on December 19th. There's also the phase 1, option 1 of the fire department that's coming before this board January 16th, but maybe when we do the fire engine December 19th, well, I'm looking at the audit report will be done December 5th. So maybe at that time, we can also look at that model as well.
Well, I think there's looking at the model, and it may,
But with the updated numbers.
right, with the updated numbers, and it may improve or not improve. I mean, we still know we're going to run out of money. I don't want to say run out of money.
We know we
There's
run a deficit.
We run a deficit running around year 29-30. But with these other things floating out there, that deficit could hit us sooner, especially because the 2 engineers SAFER grant runs out in 2026. And so I think our board needs to look holistically at how can we finance this to continue on before it becomes a crisis again, like have a brainstorming session on how do we handle this outside of just a budget meeting in May or June, because I don't know about you guys, but when we do the budget at the end of May and June, I'm so exhausted, I can't handle another, because we're going over all those numbers and asking questions. And so, how do we make up these deficits? How is this being handled? And so, but I think that depending on how much water meters we release in February and March, depends on how much money we're gonna be getting from that and growth, and that affects the CFD fund. So I'm thinking maybe in March or April, we should look at that
I think we need to
separately.
look at it before, because I think it would be a good opportunity to look at, when we look at the placement of the engine, because we need to talk about how we're funding that. But we need to update the model with fiscal year in numbers and not March of 2023. So we need to update that based upon the audit report and get that up to date. And then I think we'll look at we typically look at the water meters in February, but the water meters, I'm not sure, if you look at, we've released, I think, last count, close to 100 meters in the last 3 years.
Somewhere around there.
So, but, you know, the lag time on that, and with interest rates what they are, I'm not sure we're gonna see the development.
We're not.
And so I don't know that that's the solution. So I think we've got to look at, you know,
Yeah,
how,
well, that's it. That's the crux of the meeting.
Yeah.
What is the solution? Where else can we look? How can we address this problem? Because we have no idea, we have no solution.
well,
And
what I
I'm
also,
just concerned that, you know, that looking in the long run, we want to make sure that the fire department stays whole.
Yeah.
And what can we do to do that?
well, and I think the other thing is that I don't see on future agenda items is the CFD funds, because I think the fire committee also discussed that as well.
That's coming in that budget, because that was on that,
I don't see it on here.
it was in your, the spreadsheet that you're updating.
So no, we had, that was actually the finance and admin committee that.
Oh, the
that had
finance and
policies.
energy, that was the policy statements.
Right,
But
but
even,
that wasn't approved until Thursdays. This agenda was supposed to be.
no, but I'm talking about future agenda items. We also talked about at the fire committee, I thought we talked about picking the 80,000,
80,000.
the first 80,000 for CFD funds.
That's in that policy that the.
Oh, so you're waiting, you're
Was there-
including it in the policy to put in here. Okay,
Do we
okay.
know when we're gonna hear from the congressman's office regarding the grant? I mean, we should call him.
No, it's not up to that office.
It's not up to them.
It's tied up in the federal budget. And so the federal budget
It's
is,
the appropriations budget. They have to,
Well, I mean, it's been, I mean. I
no,
thought
the
that was-
Congress just got a speaker, or
yeah,
the House just got a speaker, I should
the,
say.
the federal government approved a 45-day continuing resolution at the end of, before, right around October 1st.
Okay,
And so it's possible they could keep punting this budget issue by these continuing
By
resolutions.
November 17th, they'll be shutting down the government.
So we won't know until all of Congress takes action and the president signs. it.
They said at the CSDAA luncheon that, it's still there, but chances that nobody's gonna know for months,
Well, they can't,
and they can't predict.
so can we, like, I read somewhere that the fire committee recommended that we should proceed with the request of fire.
We can
So
do-
can
you
we
can do that.
do that, and then if we receive the
Okay.
grant,
Really.
yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 million in the, capital improvements fund, so if we spend 1.2 to 1.4, we still have a balance of like 1.4 to 1.6, so. So, yeah, so and then if we get the grant monies, then that would just replace that, and then,
Okay.
so we have the money
Okay.
in there.
Alright.
It's the asset replacement fund and some other funds that are lacking.
So, okay, I guess, I don't know, I guess we can't talk about it too much, I just was wondering what has changed since 6 months ago we talked about it.
With regard to the congressional.
No, with the
appropriation.
fire, yeah, so why?
Well, that'll get into the funding, I think, of
Yeah.
but we have,
So I
what,
guess-
December 19th.
Okay. we'll
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
just a kind of a
Yeah.
placeholder date, we're, as I think are indicated in the minutes from the fire committee meeting. We're applying, it's been recommended that we go ahead and submit an application to USDA for the grant. As if the funding is gonna become available, get USDA to confirm the grant application is complete. And then we should be able to actually place an order, provided we meet any purchasing requirements. And the order would be eligible to be funded by the grant. even if the order were already placed.
I see, okay.
So that's the path we're attempting.
So on the December 17th future hearing date, is it a discussion on the fire department budget?
It's the authorization to place order for the type 1 fire
Well,
engine.
that's not addressing the other budget.
That's what I'm
deficit.
saying is what we need to add for that same meeting is to have the model updated with the most current numbers. Because we've talked about a number of things with CFD funding, which is not in that model.
Right,
And it doesn't have year-end close, fiscal year-end close numbers either. So we talked about updating it. So what I'm proposing is that on the 19th, that we include that discussion.
but
as
I
well.
would also, I mean, I wanna make sure our board members know that, like, you know, we're the fire station, the fire committee said, okay, let's go through with phase 1, option 1, phase 1. So we've got a $20,000 asset replacement fund there that we don't know where that money's coming from. That's not a huge amount, but if we don't get our SAFER grant again, I was told, or I remember at the hearing, it was 300,000, the minutes showed 260. You know, where are we getting that money from? Should we lose the SAFER grant? Like, how are we going back to a different model then for fire? Yeah.
So
you
that's why
know,
I'm saying
So
that
we're gonna
discussion would
discuss
be,
all that.
lend itself to that discussion. By us having that model and updated and looking at all those challenges
Okay.
that
'cause
the
I
department is
think our-
facing,
Right, okay,
because it would dovetail into that.
right.
You're causing too much trouble.
So are you?
I'll do my best. It really depends on when we get the audited figures
Yeah,
back,
well,
and
that's
so
why
we
I'm
may or may
looking-
not be able to make that date.
Well, the
but-
audit report is saying December 5th, so that's why I'm
That's still,
saying.
it's still
So-
tentative, right? yeah.
But it's dependent upon that, but I'm just saying, we need to have that model updated with the year-end fiscal numbers. And I think it would dovetail into some of these other discussions about the fire station expansion and the purchase of the fire truck, because those are the two big ticket items. And then what you've also mentioned too is the SAFER grant in a couple of years is going to not be
Well, and the
funded.
CFD monies in a couple of years. runs
Well, the
out.
CFD money, so it's all those discussions, I think dovetail into this.
Yes. And then, yes, along with the fire and drainage, which
Yeah.
we're not allowed to talk
Yeah.
about, once it's agendized.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Okay, any directors' reports and or comments?
Oh, I guess wanna make a quick comment. I don't know if any of you guys received an email from Waste Management. So I was set up with Solid Mid Waste auto pay. So just
Oh,
on
okay.
Monday, I received an email saying that out of nowhere, you need to reset your password, here's your account number,
I just
and
got an envelope like this from them today. It's got, you have to go to their website and reset your.
Cause they can't do it directly.
so I ended up online resetting the password, and you have to enter all your credit card information, so you have to do that part all over again, but hopefully people knew what was going on. I mean, I knew what it
Well, I
was.
received a flyer that said if you were on the auto pay, they could, because it had a little Q&A. And so it mentioned about if you were on auto pay, you had to go back in and reestablish it.
So, but
Yeah,
So
so.
You're on that committee, I will say, and I usually throw them away. You get this big white envelope like this, and it's only got their initials up there, which I have no clue what that is. And I wasn't even gonna open it. So it's not clear
It's
who
not
it's from.
yeah, and the email
Nobody
wasn't
knows
clear.
what W and M is,
Yeah.
I mean.
And the
Yeah.
email wasn't
I don't-
clear saying why this is happening.
So,
Once
just
you
keep
get
in
your
mind,
bill.
you're paid up through November. Right, residential customers were billed by mid-state October 1st. So if you paid your bill in October, residential customers were paid October and November. Your next bill wouldn't go out until December 1st.
So you got time to
You
change
have a
your
month to
automatic
figure this out.
payment or whatever, okay.
I didn't get the email.
I
just
didn't
got
get an
the,
email either.
line.
I'm not on auto pay with mid-state, so.
I am.
I'm not on auto pay.
I am, and I'm on.
I paid
on a
for my day.
vacation.
We should.
I didn't get an email, no.
No,
Special.
it's not.
Okay.
It's only a different transaction.
Oh, that's right.
November
City.
6th. We're going November 6th.
Number 6.
Okay, moving right along. Any other comments? All right, close the meeting and we will move into, back into closed session.
We have to leave.
How about 5 minutes? 5-minute recess.
Do you want to just stay in here?
Yeah, we're gonna stay here.
We can just shut it.
Doesn't say why.
Kick Tom out, Henry out.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, Tom.